I had an issue while I was driving down the road. A whining noise coming from the back of the car, and then when it slowed down, it was like, you know, it's like it's missing one of the balls in the bearing. It's like vibrates to a stop. Not excessive, but enough that you know, you can hear it whining while going down the road. And then when you go to the rear tire and you try to wiggle it, there's no play in it. It's tight, it's solid. But then when you give it a spin, you'll hear a slight roughness to it. And if you put your hand on the tire while you turn it and then give it a good push, you'll feel a little bit of you know, it won't be completely smooth. You'll get that little bit of like as it starts up, like it does when the weight of the car is on it. I'm pretty sure it's the passenger side. As I was driving down the road, I was, you know, kind of swerving side to side, or I go around the corner this way, it doesn't make a noise, but I go around it that way and it makes a noise. So when I'm going that way, it puts all the weight on the passenger side, and then it starts making the noise, and then that's how I know that it's the passenger side that has the problem. So you got your wheel nuts loose, and then the next step will be to loosen that big bolt in the center there, and that's a 21mm 12-point socket. I've had this off once already, so it's probably a little bit loose. And you just want to get it loose so you can undo it by hand, and then you can jack the car up. I'm going to shove this tire under the car just for a little bit added protection in case it slides off a jack. And I'm also going to add a trolley jack under there. I'm just going to jack on the front here. And give it a couple shakes, make sure it's secure. So we can pull that big bolt out, and that's attached to our CV joint. We push the bolt and it slides the CV joint back. If it's not moving, make sure you got a fair amount of threads on there, and just give it a couple light hits with the hammer. Don't hammer it too hard because you might screw up the threads. It's a pretty big bolt. So after that bolt's out, then we can take our brake drum off, and that's just that Torx bolt there. I believe that's a T30. Yeah, a T30. And I've had this drum off a few times, so this one comes off pretty easily. It's possible if your drum has been on there for a while, you might have a lip on the inside, and it may not want to slide off as easy as that one does. So, or it's rusted on there. And in that case, just go around with the hammer. Maybe spray some penetrating oil around the center. Spray some in the holes there, in the bolt holes, because it'll go in between the plate and the hub. and just give it a good few taps with a hammer. Get it to ring like a bell, and it'll help loosen off all the rust there, and you should be able to get your drum off fairly easily. If there is a lip on there, then you may have to work it a little bit. The plate that holds the brake pads on is pretty thick, but I wouldn't go prying on it too hard. But it is a possibility if you're having trouble getting your brake drum off. You can stick a screwdriver in there or a pry bar and just pry it on both sides, and maybe the brake pads will go in as the drum is coming off. Okay, so we got the drum off, and it's pretty easy from here. Now it's just the 4 bolts holding the hub assembly on. Just these 4 at the back here. So how you access those? How you access those 4 bolts at the back there, because right now with the CV shaft in place, the hub or the collar for the CV shaft is in the way of the bolts. So you're just going to slide it out, grab on the CV shaft or grab on the end there. Don't grab on the boot because you might rip it or pull it off. So, and then it's 4 bolts, so you take that one off first, and you get this thing to sit. Then you get this thing to sit in the top corner out of the way, and then you can access those other 3. You might have to wire it up or prop it up with a wrench or something, and then you can loosen off the other 3, and then your hub assembly comes right off. Those bolts are at E14, and you'll need about a 12-inch extension, works best. Then once it's loose, you can use the extension to unscrew the bolt. Get the first one out of there, and then prop the CV joint up into that corner, and then you can access the other 3. So just like that, just something like that, just wedge it in there. Okay, so all 4 bolts are out, and then it's just a matter of removing the hub. This one I've had it off already, and I sprayed it with penetrating oil and then sprayed it with paint already, so it should come off pretty easily. The hub also holds on this plate for the brakes, so everything, once the bolts are out, everything is loose here. So once you start hammering on it to get this hub to come out, careful of your brake line, because it could all slide down and you could break or bend your brake line. So mine's pretty loose, but I can show you the video of how I got the other one off. Just a bit of penetrating oil and then a bit of hammering. So this plate that holds the brakes, it sits on the collar on the back side of the bearing. So right here on the back side of the bearing, there's that lip. There's that lip right there. So that plate for the brakes, this thing here, sits on that collar, and this collar also goes into the swing arm assembly there, and that centers it all in there. So this plate might be rusted to your bearing hub assembly. So yeah, I'll try to separate it with one hand here. If not, then I'll turn the camera off, but maybe I can do it. So what you could do is put this lip on the metal at the back there and make sure the plate for the brakes is not sitting on the same metal, and then just tap it all the way around, and you should be able to drive that plate right off of the tab at the back of the hub assembly, or the collar at the back of the hub assembly. Well, it's kind of working, but I don't want to do it at the expense of cracking my brake line either. Oh, it's almost off there. Yeah, it's just hanging on by a little bit on the one side. So I'm out of penetrating oil, but what I do have, well, I have WD-40, but the end is broke off. So I have some garage door lube. I'll spray that on there, and then hopefully it'll get that collar off. There we go. So I drove that plate back off the hub. I just need a screwdriver to pry it out of there. I might be able to just wiggle it out by hand now. There we go. Yeah, it was just rusted to the back of that collar. This lip here goes inside the plate for the brakes, and it also goes inside the plate that's welded on the swing arm there to hold the whole hub assembly. So yeah, if you have trouble getting that off, it's because it's all rusted around this collar here. So I don't expect this one to be, I could probably just pop it off by hand just like that. There we go. So this collar holds on the plate for the brake, and it also goes in that welded on plate that holds the whole hub assembly on. So everything goes in like that. And then once this is off, you may be able to feel the roughness there. You know, where or see the looseness. You know, it should be turning smooth without any sound. This one is kind of loose in there on one end, and then it also makes some grinding noises when you spin it, and it's also got, well, that's brake pad stuff there, but it could be mixed with some grease. So if you're trying to figure out which one it is, it should turn nice and smooth and freely, and it shouldn't make any noise, and there shouldn't be any looseness in there. This one, the outside bearing is shot, but the inside bearing is still good. It'll probably be the same scenario on yours if you have to change it out. Yeah, the other car I had over 200,000 kilometers on it, and the rear bearings are still good. So my guess is this one was sitting for a long period of time, and it just started rusting. It just sat with a little bit of water in there, or what have you, and there's a reason why these ones are going. Plus this car was driven on salty roads quite a bit, so that could have had a bearing on it, whereas the other car was driven in the city. Yeah, nothing left to do but to put the new one on. I'm going to spray a little bit more primer on there just to protect it, keep it from rusting, and yeah, new one's going on. So this is the part from Mercedes. This is $310 just for this one side, this wheel bearing. So if you notice, the splines are at the back of the housing. So splines are right at the back there. So these are hard to find if you order online, like, or from eBay. So I kind of got to go to Mercedes for those. I did see a listing on eBay, but it's all the way from Latvia. So I'd have to wait a fair bit of time before I got the part, and I was worried it would wear out before the parts came in. So I was looking online, and I was like, hey, these ones for a 2008 or to a 2011, a Smart 451, they look like the same ones, but they're not. So this is for a 451, so same bolt pattern, same mounting pattern, same mounting size, all that is the same. It must use the same swing arm, but the difference is the, well, I guess the teeth on the inside there too look different. So on the 451, the teeth are on the outside of the hub. See, there's no teeth on the inside there, and they're all on the outside. And this one for the 450, the teeth are on the inside, and it's a different pattern too. There's fewer and larger teeth on the 450, and there's smaller and more teeth on the 451. So they're not interchangeable. So if you're looking for parts online because you don't want to pay the $310, and the part for the 451 looks like it's going to work, it will not. So yeah, gotta find that one for the 450. I give it a quick spray with primer and paint. It's not really necessary. You can just take it right out of the box and install it. I just like painting the parts, and that way they don't rust, and then if you have to change it out later on, they not all stuck together. So yeah, that's why I painted that. It's inside the brake drum, so it's not going to see a whole lot of moisture. The only part that's going to see any kind of water is at the back here where the CV joint runs into. So yeah, I just sprayed the whole thing, and if anything wants to rust, well, it'll have to wear the paint off first. So there's no orientation is specific to installing this. You just make sure the plates are lining up. So depending on how hard it was to get off, your brake line could have deformed and the holes not line up easy. So just kind of push it in place and bend that brake line back into the original form it was. Then you can put your hub on. What I did last time is I got one of the bolts and put it through the hole, and then lined it up with the back of my hub, and then just tightened it up, and then that worked pretty good. You can always spray your bolts too. So I have some zinc primer here. I'm going to give the bolt a quick spray. It won't affect tightening it up any, but it'll keep it from rusting because the outside threads stick out past the hub, and it's possible if you get a lot of water they could start rusting out, and then it's harder to remove. So I give it a quick spray with the zinc primer, or just regular primer works too, or none, depending on whatever you want to do. So let's get the bolt through there. There, it's lined up in the hole. Get it lined up on the hub. And just get the bolt started on the hub. There we go. I got the bolt into the hub. And then we can line up the hub with the holes on the brake plate and the mounting plate. Make sure it's all lined up. And then we just go from the back, get the bolts back in, and then tighten it up to spec. You want to get at least one of them snugged up really good, just to make sure everything is fitting together well. You don't want to get it misaligned and then tighten it up against the plate instead of through the center of the plate. So just make sure it's all the way back. So just make sure the hub is all the way back and it's through the two plates there, through the brake plate and through the mounting plate, and then you can tighten it up. So I'm going to tighten those first three up. I'm going to tighten them up fully and torque them before I get that top right hand bolt in there, because I'll have to bring the CV axle down to this corner to access that bolt hole. So if you're doing it from the ground like I'm doing here and you don't have the car up on a hoist, you can tighten up the bolts pretty tight with your ratchet, and then put your torque wrench on there, because if you don't have a ratcheting torque wrench, if you have just one of the old style torque wrenches like I do here with the dial, the rod and the dial, then you need a fair amount of room, because it doesn't ratchet back. Or you could get one of those ratchet adapters for the end. But anyway, I recommend tighten it up pretty tight with your ratchet, almost as tight as you can make it, and then you can tighten it up with the torque wrench. Okay, so the torque for these bolts is 65 Newton meters or 48 foot-pounds. 65 Newton meters or 48 foot-pounds. Ran out of play on there. It's 48 foot-pounds. So once you got all three of those torqued down, you can run your CV axle down to the bottom left hand side there and put the last bolt in. There we go, 48 foot-pounds. And once all the bolts are torqued, get that CV axle back in there. Make sure they're turning together and the teeth have meshed. And then before you put your bolt in, make sure you don't have any debris on the end of it, because the end of this bolt goes into the CV joint. So if you have a whole whack of dirt in there, it's going to get into the CV joint. So just wipe your bolt clean before you put it back in. There we go. And then we put our drum back on, aligning the bolt hole. We install our little T30 Torx bolt. I'm sure there's a torque spec for that one, but I don't know if it's such an important one. I just usually just give it a good snugness. If it does come loose, it'll stay in the back of the rim, so you take the rim off and then the bolt will fall out. But I usually just snug it up, and that's good. I don't worry about torquing it every time. So the hub assembly's all on there. New bearings on. Should turn nice and free. Yeah, a lot smoother than the other one was, that's for sure. So I'll get the tire back on, and then we can tighten up that bolt to the CV shaft. To tighten up this bolt, it's a two-step process. You first tighten it to 30 Newton meters or 22 foot-pounds, and then you go 90 degrees, so a quarter of a turn. So 30 Newton meters or 22 foot-pounds, and then a quarter of a turn, and then it's tight. And it doesn't help that the car is rolling, so this is a good time to set the e-brake. There we go, there's 22 foot-pounds. Then I'm going to get my solid breaker bar to tighten it up so I don't overload my torque wrench. And I'm going to go get a snipe. Okay, here we go, 90 degrees. There we go, just like that.